What's up ladies and gents, Kknowley here, welcome back to another Payday video. Today, in a break from the usual content, I'm going to be following up on an urge I've had ever since the changes to the meta went through. I want to revisit some of the old broken metas and remember what playing Payday was like back in the day. I'll be covering all you need to know about the current one very soon, once I feel I've done enough testing with the changes. But honestly, overall it's pretty muted compared to how much things changed back when new perk decks were being added every other month. Payday is now in one of its more balanced states since the game launched, which isn't saying all that much, and there's still a long way to go, but nothing in today's game compares to launch Grinder. So without further ado, let's get into some Payday 2 nostalgia. Before I go any further, I just want to draw your attention over to another video to check out after you finish this one. This weekend, I was on Red Archer Live's podcast, the Redcast, joining some pretty esteemed past company to talk about myself, this channel, and of course, Payday 3. It was an absolute blast, and if you're at all interested in my early ideas or heavy speculation regarding Payday 3, give it a listen. Link at the top of the description. Troy's an excellent creator, and it was brilliant to get his thoughts on some of these things from an Overkill partner's perspective. Anyway, with that said, it's time for a quick history lesson. I want to take you all back to the summer of 2015, almost 6 years ago. The Golden Green Casino had just been released, bringing with it the most detailed pre-planning ever seen, a serious challenge to stealth fans, and a brand new character, Sokol. Of course, that meant a new perk deck to boot. But here's where things got messy. Grinder was released with Sokol in Update 70, and it was completely busted. On launch, with the final perk Euphoria, you were looking at 5 health regen every 0.5 seconds for 4 seconds total, with the ability to stack the effect once per second. So, 1 instance of damage was giving you 40 health over 4 seconds. If you were maximizing consistent damage with this, and applying up to 4 instances at once, you would be regenerating 40 health a second. What's most important here was the speed at which you'd be healing, compared to today's Grinder, which actually offers more health per separate proc, but at a much lower incidence rate. This made you virtually unkillable. You see, back then, enemies on the highest difficulty simply didn't hit that hard. We didn't have as many survival tools either, as everything was very scaled back, meaning that sort of regeneration was equivalent to immortality, something that was eventually nerfed until it reached the stage it is today. Nowadays, things on both ends are very different, so the question I want to answer today is, would this totally broken perk deck at launch even be considered high tier within the current meta? Don't get me wrong, Grinder is still a fine deck. In fact, it can trivialize lower difficulties to the point of being the deck I always used when recording the story, since it made it genuinely tough to die even without a HUD. However, with most damage on death sentence being lethally bursty, can the old regen cope and be as strong as it once was? The way I'm able to replicate this effect and test it in 2021 is through the installation of this skill reversion mod on Mod Workshop. Now remember, I'm running this for purely nostalgic reasons in offline solo lobbies. Don't bring this into online, you run the risk of being branded a cheater and negatively impacting others' experience with the game. But for a bit of solo fun, it's a trip down memory lane which is well worth taking. First up, I tested it on the much changed Death Wish difficulty. This used to be as hard as it got, and whilst it looks very different today than it did in 2015, it's still a great testing ground for classic Grinder. Overall, I found it absolutely did the job. With interspace bullseye procs, it was quite easy to keep myself topped up, and when I set up incendiary trip mines to maximize my regen, it was actually possible to tank up large groups even without armor. However, it wasn't exactly what I'd call broken. Snipers still present an issue that it just doesn't have an answer to, and there were moments where other decks would have likely outperformed the old King of Deathwish, but in general, it certainly was pretty strong. Next, I moved on to the new hardest difficulty, Death Sentence, which is where I feared its usefulness would really drop off, just as modern Grinder does. I picked a reasonably high cover map, the Dragon Heist, to give it the absolute best environment to thrive in, and overall, was fairly unimpressed. It leans very heavily on Grace Windows and Bullseye to keep itself alive, and it was hard to remain topped up when head-on gunfights posed such a risk. This meant I was leaning on trip mines even more to get things done. If I was ever rushed or caught out of cover, there was never an opportunity to leverage the regen to keep myself alive. Simply put, I could only make use of the rapid health gain when I was out of serious danger, and in order to allow me to take another single shot in the future. This means that in many ways it felt like I was using the hacker deck for healing, but without the added benefit of dodge chance and the ECM jammer. I was able to complete the heist in the end, but not without a fair share of spills in the process. Also, the dragon heist is very easy, all things considered. I would likely be torn apart on a more open map with this setup. When you look at the perk decks that really excel on Death Sentence, there's a set of criteria that signals viability. Either it needs to offer very high damage reduction to deal with open cover objectives, such as with Kingpin or Stoic. It needs to have invulnerability and the ability to gate out damage, as with Armorer and Anarchist, or it needs to offer survivability and utility, as with Sicario and Hacker. There are strong fringe decks like Crew Chief that offer a bit of everything and help out the team with a regen and damage reduction focus. But Grinder really only offers a marginal degree of tankiness alongside solid regen to just the user. There's no utility and no nuance to it. Grinder just doesn't have enough to have it thrive on this difficulty when you're taking over 50% of your health from a single shot, which in turn requires about 4 seconds to heal, even operating at maximum effectiveness. Old Grinder is good on paper, but it just doesn't stand the test of time and would probably be closer to being balanced if it received a reversion of those initial nerfs. So, if this is the case, can we just conclude Grinder was a deck from a different time and design philosophy that should be relegated to use primarily on the lower difficulties? I personally don't think it should be. There are ways to modernise the deck without breaking it again, and I think it's worth doing alongside the balance changes being made to weapons in Payday 2. For example, one simple way to buff it would be to change it from flat numeric healing to percentage heals. This would make it scale much better with additional health, and maybe stand a chance against the cross-map burst of Death Sentence. Another quick fix to many of these sorts of decks would be to give them some form of invulnerability, for instance allowing you not to take damage for a second after receiving a certain amount of initial damage to health. This would give you some time to regen and possibly survive another shot in a pinch, offering some counterplay against the snipers which it seriously struggles against. Overall, I think these first two solutions are a bit boring, uninvolved and likely imbalanced. My personal suggestion to bring Grinder into Death Sentence viability would be to grant it a burst heal as well as its gradual one. In my ideal Payday 2, perks would be balanced around Mayhem or Death Wish, however to incentivize more heisters to play the Death Sentence mode, they should all be granted a unique Death Sentence only mechanic, designed to counter what makes this difficulty so hard. For instance with Grinder here, give it the ability to store up health vials whenever you deal damage at full health. Essentially this would grant Grinder players the equivalent of a single-use high cooldown medkit to counter any massive burst damage that comes your way and reset in cover. I think this would modernise the deck for 2021 Payday without much else needing to be changed. To me, it was odd coming back to such an icon of imbalance to find it had fallen so far. I had these ludicrous memories of 4-man release Grinder trivialising the game and wanted to see if that would still be the case, but then surprisingly, Payday's come too far, and honestly a reversion would likely not even dent the high-end meta. It would likely only make things easier for Grinder on Death Wish and below. So that does it for this trip down memory lane. If you want to see me do more of these, either in that you enjoy seeing the relics of Payday's past, or you like my perk deck suggestions for a potential future rebalance, let me know. After playing the game for so many years, it's easy to forget where we came from and how drastically different things are today. Remember, check out the podcast, tons of great discussion to sink your teeth into there, and until the next one, have a great day, I'll see you all very soon. As ever, thank you very much to my Mean Infamy patrons and above. If you want to join that infamous club to see yourself in the credits or get early exclusive access to my videos, including the story videos, check out my Patreon link below. Remember the Discord is open to all if you crave some more Payday discussion. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I'll see you all very soon for the next one.